She smiled at him like she always did, leaning in close so only he could hear. Less than 30 seconds later, she was on top of him in front of guards, families, and crying children, driving a sharpened pen deep into his neck, again and again and again. His blood splattered across the plastic table, dripping onto the concrete floor as chaos erupted in the visiting room. No one knew why, not the officers, not the other inmates, until investigators uncovered a secret so personal, so brutal, it left even the most hardened detective speechless. This is the story of Alicia Grant, and the betrayal that turned a prison visit into a killing ground. Alicia Grant wasn't born a killer. She grew up in a small apartment above her grandmother's grocery store in Newark, New Jersey. She was bright, quick-witted, the kind of girl who could talk her way out of anything. Teachers said she had leadership in her, but leadership doesn't pay the rent when your mom's gone and your dad's in prison. By 19, Alicia was running with the wrong crowd, boosting cars, flipping stolen phones, hustling just to keep the lights on. It wasn't glamorous, just survival. But survival turned into a string of bad decisions, and one armed robbery too many landed her in front of a judge who'd heard it all before. At 23 years old, she was sentenced to 15 years at Greenhaven Correctional Facility. Inside, Alicia kept her head down. She took classes, worked in the prison kitchen, and stayed out of fights. The guards knew her as quiet, polite, the kind of inmate who might actually walk out and never come back. But everything changed in 2021 when she reconnected with Marcus Ellis. He wasn't just an old flame, he was her first love. They'd met when she was 16, lost touch after her arrest, and now here he was again, showing up in her life with promises of loyalty, forgiveness, and a future. At first it was letters, then phone calls, then visits. By summer, they were inseparable. Or at least, that's how it looked from the outside. When Marcus visited, Alicia lit up in a way her cellmates rarely saw. He'd bring her snacks from the vending machine, press his palm against hers through the glass before visits started, whisper promises about the life they'd build when she got out. But Marcus didn't come alone. Sometimes he'd show up with Janelle Parker, Alicia's best friend since middle school. They'd grown up on the same block, shared clothes, secrets, even a fake ID back in the day. To Alicia, Janelle wasn't just a friend, she was family. Janelle would tell Alicia about the outside world, about the latest gossip from their old neighborhood, about how she was holding it down for her while she served her time. Alicia trusted her completely. If Marcus needed someone to talk to while Alicia was locked up, who better than Janelle? To the guards and other inmates, the three of them looked like an unshakable unit. Marcus in his fitted cap and pressed jeans, Janelle with her hair laid and nails perfect, and Alicia, smiling like she'd found a little piece of freedom in that visiting room. But cracks started to form. Late in 2022, Marcus began visiting less often, and when he did, he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly, avoiding eye contact. When Alicia asked him about it, he brushed it off. "Just work," he'd say. Janelle's visits became less frequent too, but when she came, she'd always find a way to mention Marcus. Little things about what he was doing, where he'd been, how stressed he seemed. At first, Alicia didn't think much of it, but in prison, your instincts are all you've got. And hers were telling her something was off. By January 2023, Alicia couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. Something about Marcus and Janelle's sudden distance didn't sit right. Phone calls with Marcus felt rushed. When she asked if he'd seen Janelle lately, there was always a pause before he answered. Inside, rumors moved faster than light. Inmates called it the whisper network. Scraps of gossip passed in the chow line, in laundry, during yard time. One afternoon, while folding uniforms in the laundry room, another inmate named Kira leaned over and said quietly, "Girl, you know your man's out here real friendly with your friend, right?" Alicia laughed it off. Kira was known for stirring drama, but 2 days later, another inmate, this time from a completely different block, told her she'd heard the same thing. Marcus and Janelle had been spotted together. A lot. Dinner dates, shopping, even at a baby boutique. That last detail made Alicia's stomach turn. Baby boutique. The word stuck in her head like a splinter she couldn't dig out. She started watching Marcus closely during visits, the way he avoided talking about Janelle, the way he tensed if she asked what he'd been up to. One afternoon during a phone call, she caught a baby crying in the background. When she asked, Marcus claimed it was his cousin's kid, but Alicia knew all his cousins. None had babies. That night, lying in her bunk, Alicia replayed every visit, every letter, every smile between Marcus and Janelle. The picture forming in her mind was one she didn't want to believe. It happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon in August. Alicia was mopping the hallway outside the prison library when a guard named Peterson, one who'd always been a little too friendly, stopped her. "You hear about your girl Janelle?" he asked, smirking. Alicia froze. "What about her?" Peterson shrugged like he didn't care either way. "She came to my wife hospital last week for her baby medication." He held his hands. 6 months, maybe 7. Looked healthy, though. Glowing. Alicia tried to laugh it off. "Good for her," she said, forcing her voice not to crack. But inside, her chest was burning. That night, she made a call to her cousin Shay on the outside. "What's going on with Janelle?" she asked, skipping any small talk. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Shay sighed. "Leash, I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but it's Marcus's. Everybody knows. They've been together for months. He didn't even try to hide it." Alicia felt like the floor dropped out beneath her. Her best friend, her man. And now, a baby. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. She just sat there on the cold metal stool in the phone booth, gripping the receiver until her knuckles turned white. When she hung up, something in her had shifted. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. And in prison, humiliation was a kind of death all its own. Over the next 2 weeks, Alicia barely spoke to anyone. She stopped going to the yard, stopped eating with her usual crew. Instead, she started spending time in the craft room, working on a project. A cheap plastic pen, melted and sharpened to a fine point. To anyone else, it was nothing. To her, it was insurance. September 11th, 2023. It was a Saturday, cold but sunny, the kind of day that made the prison yard look almost peaceful from the outside. Alicia wasn't expecting any visitors, not from Marcus, not from anyone. At 1:47 p.m., a CO knocked on her cell door. "Grant, suit up, you got a visit." Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. She didn't ask who. She just walked to the visiting area, her face calm, her mind a storm. When the guard opened the door, there he was. Marcus. Clean haircut. New sneakers. That same cologne she remembered from the nights they'd spent together before prison swallowed her life. But now, all she smelled was betrayal. He smiled when he saw her, like nothing was wrong, like her best friend wasn't at home carrying his child. They sat at their usual table in the far corner, away from the vending machines. Other families chatted around them. Kids ran between tables. A CO laughed with another guard near the entrance. For the first 15 minutes, it was small talk. Marcus talked about work, about the weather, about nothing that mattered. Alicia nodded, silent, letting him fill the air with lies. Then, at 2:09 p.m., she leaned forward, both elbows on the table. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "When were you going to tell me?" Marcus blinked. "Tell you what?" "That you knocked up Janelle." The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, looking away like maybe the right words were hiding somewhere on the floor. When he finally spoke, it was barely a mumble. "I didn't want you to hear it like this." Alicia's hand slid under the waistband of her khakis. Her fingers curled around the smooth, warm plastic of the sharpened pen she'd smuggled in from the craft room. Her pulse slowed. Her breathing steadied. The decision had already been made days ago. Marcus barely had time to register the movement. 1 second, Alicia's hands were resting on the table. The next, she was across it, the sharpened pen flashing in her fist. The first stab caught him in the side of the neck, a hot spray of blood hitting her face and shirt. He gasped, eyes wide, hands flying up in instinct, but she was already driving the pen down again, and again, and again. The visiting room erupted into chaos. A woman screamed. A child cried. Chairs clattered to the floor as people scrambled away. 2 guards sprinted toward them, shouting for her to stop. But Alicia was gone, not physically, but in her mind. All the late-night doubts, the whispered rumors, the image of Janelle's pregnant belly. It all funneled into one blinding, unstoppable rage. It took 3 officers to drag her off him. Marcus collapsed to the floor, blood pooling fast under his head. 1 guard pressed towels to the wound while another radioed for medical. Alicia didn't fight the cuffs, she just sat there breathing hard, staring at the crimson stains on her hands. For the first time in weeks, her mind was quiet. They didn't take Alicia back to her unit. Instead, 2 COs walked her straight to a small windowless room with a metal table bolted to the floor. Her hands were still cuffed in front of her, flecks of Marcus's blood drying on her knuckles. Detective Harris sat down across from her, flipping open a notepad. "You want to tell me what happened in there?" he asked. Alicia leaned back in the chair, eyes locked on the ceiling. "You already know," she said flatly. The detective glanced at her file. 5 years into an 8-year sentence for armed robbery. No prior violent incidents inside, no gang ties, just quiet. "So what changed?" he pressed. Alicia finally looked at him, her voice steady. "He made his choice. I made mine." Harris let the silence stretch. In his experience, that's when people broke. But Alicia didn't. She didn't flinch when he mentioned Janelle's name. Didn't react when he said the baby was due in June. When he told her Marcus was in critical condition, she only asked one question. Did they get the pen out? That was it. No apology. No regret. By the time the interview ended, Harris knew she wasn't going to give him a neat confession. Whatever happened in that visiting room, in her mind it was already settled. By Monday morning, everyone inside had heard about the visiting room attack. In prison, news travels faster than light, and Alicia's story was the only thing people were talking about. Inmates in the chow line whispered as she walked past. Some looked at her with respect, or the kind reserved for someone who had taken revenge into their own hands. Others kept their distance, afraid her temper might spill over on them next. In the rec yard, a group of women huddled together, retelling the scene like it was a campfire story. "She didn't even yell," one said, "just went for him like she'd been planning it forever." Another added, "That's what happens when you play 2 women." Even some of the COs couldn't hide their curiosity. One officer leaned against a doorframe as Alicia passed and muttered, "Guess love'll kill you, huh?" She didn't look at him. She didn't look at anyone. The administration locked down the visiting room for a week, citing security concerns. Every inmate knew that really meant, we don't want a repeat of what happened with Alicia Grant. For Alicia, the sudden fame meant 2 things. She wouldn't be messed with, and she wouldn't be left alone. The attention was constant, and with every retelling of her story, the legend grew. Some said she'd carved Marcus's name into the table before attacking him. Others claimed she'd smiled while the guards dragged her away. Only Alicia knew what really happened, and she wasn't telling. Marcus never made it out of the prison. The paramedics worked on him for nearly 20 minutes in the visiting room, their voices urgent, their gloves slick with blood. They wheeled him out on a stretcher, an oxygen mask strapped to his face. But by the time the ambulance reached the hospital gates, he was gone. News of his death hit the prison before noon. Staff kept the announcement quiet, but in a place like this, secrets don't last. Within hours, every inmate knew the man Alicia had stabbed, the man who'd gotten her best friend pregnant, was dead. Some called it justice, others called it stupid. But no one called it an accident. When a guard stopped outside Alicia's cell that evening and told her he didn't make it, she didn't ask for details. She didn't ask about the funeral, or the baby, or what Janelle might be thinking. She just turned back to her bunk, lay down, and closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she slept straight through the night. Alicia didn't deny what she'd done. She didn't ask for a lawyer during the hearing. When the judge read the charge, second-degree murder, she just nodded. Marcus's family filled the first 2 rows of the courtroom. His mother cried quietly into a tissue. Janelle wasn't there. Whether out of shame or fear, no one knew. The prosecutor pushed for the maximum, arguing the attack was premeditated. Alicia's public defender tried to frame it as a crime of passion. The judge didn't buy it. She was given 25 years to life on top of the time she was already serving. No parole eligibility for at least 2 decades. Back at the prison, there were no cheers, no taunts, just silence when she returned to the unit. Her story had already become legend, whispered in the laundry room, repeated in the chow hall. Some women saw her as dangerous. Others saw her as someone who did what they only dreamed about. Alicia never mentioned Marcus again. Not to the other inmates, not to the chaplain, not even to herself. Even years later, Alicia's name still echoes through the walls of Marin Correctional Institution. Inmates whisper it in the yard. Guards shake their heads when they hear it. Marcus is gone. His life ended in a matter of seconds, inside a visiting room that was supposed to be safe. Janelle carries his child, unaware of how close the threads of vengeance came to touching her life as well. Alicia sits in her cell, quietly, almost invisible. She doesn't boast. She doesn't cry. She doesn't need to. Because in her mind, the score has been settled. Betrayal doesn't get second chances. Lies don't get forgiveness. And some truths are too dangerous to hear too late. The prison updated security after the attack. Metal detectors, strict visitor checks, no sharp objects. But nothing could erase that moment. Nothing could erase the memory of a woman who uncovered a betrayal so deep it became fatal. Some call it justice, some call it tragedy. But for Alicia Grant, it's just the truth. And in a place where every day is measured in walls and bars, sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a knife or a pen. It's a heart pushed too far. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Not every story ends the way we want. Not every betrayal gets justice. But every life, every choice, and every secret leaves its mark, sometimes forever. If you want more stories that make you feel every twist and turn, hit that subscribe button. We post true crime stories every single day. No fluff, no fake drama, just the truth. Thank you for watching.